Cat Smith.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I am raising the issue of the Valproate Pregnancy Prevention Programme today as a result of tireless campaigning by my constituent, Janet Williams. Janet, who is in the lobby, along with her friend Emma Murphy, launched the Independent Fetal Anti-Convulsant Trust, in fact, in November 2012, and they have almost single-handedly kept this issue of disabilities caused by anticonvulsant medication on the political agenda since then. Despite both living in the northwest of England, they regularly travel to and from London in order to demand action from drugs companies, politicians and civil servants, and they will simply not take no for an answer. Mr Deputy Speaker, as you might be familiar with a woman from Lancaster, when she's got her teeth into something, she's not going to let go. The campaign for justice and to ensure that no families are similarly affected in the future continues, but the fact that progress has been made in recent years is largely down to Janet and Emma. It may help if I first provide some background to the issue of sodium valproate. The drug sodium valproate, Epilim, is manufactured by the pharmaceutical company Sanofi Aventis, amongst others, and has been prescribed in the UK since the 1970s. Despite its effectiveness for certain types of seizures, research has demonstrated that it carries a higher level of risk to the exposed fetus. There are currently around 27,000 women taking sodium valproate in England and Wales. Scientific data demonstrates that around 10% of children exposed to sodium valproate will be born with a major congenital malformation. Their IQ is likely to be lower, with 29% requiring additional educational support and with 6% being diagnosed with significant social communication difficulties such as autism. Estimates on the number of children still being affected by this drug vary. In February 2016, the Honourable Member for North Norfolk, the then Minister for Life Sciences, stated that there are 336 children exposed to valproate every year. Figures from the Clinical Practice Research Data Link suggest the figure could in fact be 176. But even using this lower number, it would imply that 7,000 children have been harmed by the drug valproate since it first came onto the market in 1973, with a further 28 per month still exposed to it. Sodium valproate received its licence to be prescribed in the UK in 1973. The first case reporting the effects of sodium valproate during pregnancy appeared in 1981. And by 1987, the damages caused by the drug in pregnancy were recognised throughout the medical profession, with it given the title Fetal Valproate Syndrome in 1995. National Archive documents show that the Committee for Safety on Medicines at the time of licensing were aware of the dangers of valproate when taken in pregnancy, yet they took the decision to inform medical professionals, but to keep women taking the medication in the dark. The patient information leaflet for sodium valproate was only changed to highlight the risks during pregnancy in the year 2000, and even then, the information was very sparse. Mr Deputy Speaker, I believe that women and children have been let down by the pharmaceutical industry, by successive governments, and over many decades. And I hope that one day they'll be compensated for the failures that were allowed to occur. I wish, however, to focus the remainder of my time on addressing how we can ensure that all women of childbearing age taking sodium valproate today are aware of the risks it poses and are able to make informed decisions about their future. Mr Deputy Speaker, I am not pursuing to ban this drug, but instead that women who are taking this very effective drug are able to make informed decisions for them and their potential children. The Valproate Toolkit was introduced in March 2016, giving healthcare professionals the opportunity to inform patients voluntarily of the dangers of valproate in pregnancy. Sadly, this failed to achieve its aims. The Valproate Toolkit took the form of a patient booklet, pharmacy cards on collection of a valproate prescription, healthcare professional booklets, and a checklist for specialists. 2 surveys carried out by InFact for both patients and pharmacists found that around 85% of patients were not receiving the patient booklet and 90% were not receiving the pharmacist card. In a letter from Sanofi on the 27th of May 2016, in fact were informed that the patient booklets were not given to GPs, as had previously been indicated by ministers, but that they needed to be downloaded by GPs from the Sanofi website. I would be grateful if the Minister could let me know, in designing of the pregnancy prevention programme, what lessons have been learned from the failure of the Valproate toolkit. Turning to the pregnancy prevention programme. The pregnancy prevention programme, as a mandatory action, was introduced in April 2018 following the failure of the Valproate toolkit, which gave healthcare professionals the opportunity to discuss the dangers of Valproate with their patients, and it states: to protect public health, the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, the MHRA, has changed the licence for Valproate medicines, Epilim, Depakote and generic brands. Valproate must no longer be prescribed to women or girls of childbearing potential unless they are on the Pregnancy Prevention Programme, the PPP. Healthcare professionals who seek to prescribe Valproate to their female patients must make sure they are enrolled in the PPP. This includes the completion of a signed risk acknowledgement form when their treatment is reviewed by a specialist, at least annually. As with the Valproate toolkit, the PPP included in it a booklet for patients to enable them to understand the risks, and a small credit card size information card for pharmacists to give on dispensing the drug. However, the PPP was strengthened by the addition of the acknowledgement of risk form, which was to be signed by the doctor and the patient on the communicating of the risks. For the pharmacist, there was the addition of ensuring that every dispensed prescription of Valproate included the patient information leaflet, the credit card size information and warning stickers on the white chemist boxes, all of which had been supplied by the drug company Sanofi on the instruction given by the MHRA. To get to this stage, numerous meetings over a 5-year period had been held to discuss how this information would be designed and best instructed to both the healthcare professional and the patient, working through the Valproate stakeholder network meetings and the expert working group meeting at the MHRA. Following the failure of the first toolkit, patient groups are understandably on guard to ensure that they are aware of problems. Worryingly, over a 10-month period, InFact have found that the majority of women were not receiving the new pregnancy prevention programme from their doctor or their pharmacist. From December to February, InFact collected information through a survey which showed that out of 74 women, 80% received the white chemist box, 40% of whom never received the patient information leaflet, and 41% said that only some of the time. 78% of these women never received the small credit card size information, with the majority of them never having the warning stickers on the white box. And during appointments with their healthcare professionals, approximately 40% have never discussed the PPP with their doctor, with over 60% never having been asked to sign the acknowledgement of risk form, and 73% never having an alternative medication suggested to them. These figures alone indicate that women continue to be failed by their healthcare professional and pharmacist with the PPP, even though its legislative status has been recognised and instructions given via the General Pharmaceutical Council to pharmacists and the MHRA to healthcare professionals. In the autumn of 2018, proof of the failure in the form of videos and photographs were passed to the MHRA and in turn passed to the enforcement agency in order for them to investigate, and yet we're still waiting for a response to their investigations. The consequences of these findings are deeply troubling. They indicate that women and girls aged between 15 and 45 years old may still not be being given the informed choice about their medication, and they're not being given any information about alternative medications which may be suitable for them, and they're not being asked to sign the acknowledgement of risk form by their GP or specialist. On collection of their Valproate prescription, they're not receiving any instruction from pharmacists, nor are they receiving the small credit card size information, the patient information leaflet, or any warning stickers on the white boxes. It's worth reiterating that there are still approximately 27,000 women of childbearing potential being prescribed sodium valproate every year, and 70% of those have not been offered a change in their medication since April last year and the introduction of the PPP. So approximately 19,000 women are still at risk of becoming pregnant whilst prescribed valproate with no instructions from either their doctor or their pharmacist. In addition to the risks outlined earlier, InFact have been made aware that folic acid does not have the desired effect when taking sodium valproate, and that the dangers to the fetus are no longer dose-related, making it a possibility that all those exposed to valproate in the room will be affected by it. And therefore would like to ask the Minister to clarify what assessments have been done to ensure that women prescribed valproate receive the pregnancy prevention programme and are offered an alternative medication where possible. And what assessments are taking place to calculate how many healthcare professionals, including GP surgeries and pharmacies, complete the PPP with their valproate patients. And what the enforcement agency intends to do to ensure that those failing to comply with the PPP have penalties imposed to ensure that they don't continue to do so. And finally, I would like to request that the Minister meet with me and representatives from InFact to discuss how we can make sure that the pregnancy prevention programme works for women, allowing them to make informed choices about their own health and the health of potential future children. Thank you.
Minister Hammond. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to answer this debate on behalf of the Government this afternoon. It's an honour to follow because the Honourable Lady has secured an important debate, and I want to pay tribute to her and also her constituents from InFact, who she mentioned. She has rightly set out, and members of this House will be aware, that valproate is an effective treatment for epilepsy and bipolar disorder. For a few women with epilepsy, it may be the only effective treatment, and the Honourable Lady quite rightly recognised that in her speech. However, its use is associated with serious side effects in children exposed during pregnancy, a 40% risk of persistent developmental disorders and a 10% risk of physical birth disorders. Valproate should therefore only be used to treat women of childbearing age if alternative drugs are ineffective or not tolerated. In 2018, in April 2018, strengthened regulatory measures for valproate were introduced, and these include, as the Honourable Lady has asked me a number of questions, a pregnancy prevention programme that aims to rapidly reduce and eventually eliminate pregnancies exposed to valproate. The challenge is to ensure it's only used by those who need it, that they're fully informed about the risks in pregnancy, and the treatment is closely monitored. Let me emphasise it's vital that no woman stops taking valproate or any other anti-epileptic without discussing it with her doctor. It has, as a drug, valproate, always been known since the time it was first licensed to carry serious risks if taken during pregnancy. However, important questions have been raised about the extent to which women have been informed about the nature and the magnitude of those risks over decades. At the time it was first marketed in 1974, animal studies had shown that there may be a risk of birth defects. Health professionals were made aware of this and expected to weigh the benefits against the risks, and they were expected to prescribe valproate only in severe cases or in those resistant to other treatments. Difficult prescribing decisions sometimes had to be made, but nonetheless, campaigners have highlighted minutes of a meeting on the Committee for Safety of Medicines in 1973, as the Honourable Lady referenced, which concluded it would be best not to mention the risks of birth defects following the use of anticonvulsants in the information supplied with the medicine, but the doctors should be informed. At that time, it would have been the doctor's responsibility to pass on the information on side effects. Today, patients and doctors are expected to make decisions jointly based on open communication about all the risks and the benefit of a treatment. Over the years, warnings have been issued to prescribers by the regulator when new evidence on risks in pregnancy have become available. In 1983 and in 1993, communications went out to update prescribers on the growing evidence of the risks in pregnancy, and in 2003, prescribers were warned about a possible risk of developmental delay in children exposed to valproate during pregnancy. Warnings were extended to include a risk of autism in 2010, and a further bulletin was issued in 2013. It was around that time that the full magnitude and the nature of risks of valproate in pregnancy first became known, following the long-term follow-up of affected children. Given the seriousness of the accumulating evidence, the MHRA initiated a major Europe-wide safety review on valproate in pregnancy, which was completed in November 2014. The conclusion was that the balance of the benefits and risks of valproate in epilepsy and bipolar disorder remained favourable in women of childbearing potential, only where other drugs are ineffective. The MHRA went further than updating the statutory information as required by the EU review and developed the Valproate toolkit for healthcare professionals and women. This consists of a set of clear and informative materials. Over 100,000 healthcare professionals have received the toolkit, and I think this is referenced in the Honourable Lady's speech, in the autumn of 2015, given the importance of the issue, the former Minister for Life Science brought together all the relevant healthcare bodies to support the promotion of that toolkit and ensure coordinated messaging was given out to health professionals and patients. The MHRA further developed this group into a 39-strong stakeholder network of health system organisations, health professional bodies, charities, campaign groups, which has been convened 11 times to date to raise awareness and to help embed new practices in, the new measures in practices. However, despite extensive work to communicate the risks of Valproate, concerns about the limited impact of action in the UK and other member states has led to a further EU review. That resulted in 2018 in strengthened regulatory position that Valproate must not be used in women of childbearing age unless they comply with the requirements of the Pregnancy Prevention Programme. All healthcare professionals who prescribe Valproate to female patients must ensure that they're enrolled in the Pregnancy Prevention Programme. It ensures that women must use effective contraception throughout their Valproate treatment and must have an annual review with a specialist, which includes consideration of alternative treatments, and must sign an annual risk acknowledgement form. Members will also know, or the Honourable Lady I'm sure will also know, that in February 2018 the former Secretary of State announced that he had asked Baroness Cumberledge to lead the Independent Medicines and Medical Devices Safety Review. This review is exploring what happened in the cases of Valproate, Primidus and Mesh, and considering the robustness of processes, the quality of engagement and the response to patients' concerns, and any wider lessons. And I, as I'm sure, like the Honourable Lady, welcome this important work and look forward to seeing the recommendations from this review. It is vitally important not to wait for the outcome of the review. Much work is being done and will continue to be done to ensure that there is compliance with the Valproate Pregnancy Prevention Programme. We expect the review to report in 2019, later this year. It has been consulting in a detailed and, I believe, patient-orientated manner across the UK with patients and relevant patient and healthcare organisations. The Honourable Lady in her speech raised a number of issues about the Pregnancy Prevention Programme. The MHRA has monitored the impact of the Pregnancy Prevention Programme closely since its introduction last year. Monitoring is being done via data from the Clinical Practice Research Data Link and national databases, which link community drug dispensing and maternity services data. The MHRA is also accessing data from clinical audits run by healthcare professional organisations and information on patient experience via surveys. Patient input and engagement with the patient group, in fact, as the Honourable Lady has referenced and run by her two constituents, or started up by her constituents, has been invaluable through this process, both as a source of evidence and feedback on the implementation of action. The data has shown a decline in the use of Valproate in women of childbearing age, but there is, as we recognise, local variability. I'm also aware of evidence of non-compliance from some healthcare professionals, which I have to say is of a great concern. And non-compliance with Pregnancy Prevention Programme is not acceptable. Those concerns are being investigated to ensure that people are brought back into compliance. And I can inform the Honourable Lady that enforcement action will be taken as and when is necessary. The concerns that were raised in the survey that she referenced has led the UK Chief Pharmaceutical Officers to contact all pharmacists to stress their responsibility when dispensing Valproate. And this was reinforced by messages from professional regulators to their members and in articles that are in the electronic bulletin Drug Safety Update, which MRA produced and was out last September and again in December, making sure that all healthcare professionals recognise that they need to examine where they're prescribing and to ensure that they are in compliance with new measures. Achieving full compliance with Valproate, the Valproate Pregnancy Prevention Programme will require concerted action across the healthcare system, and I recognise there is more to do. But I stress again, healthcare professionals who prescribe it must make sure that they're involved, that the female patients are enrolled in the pregnancy prevention programme. And as I have said, non-compliance is not acceptable. The Honourable Lady asked a number of other questions, some of which I hope that I've answered during my speech, but she will know that my honourable friend, or my honourable and noble friend, the Baroness Blackwood, specialises and will lead in this area, and I know that she'd be delighted to meet the Honourable Lady and members from INFACT. Can I say to the Honourable Lady, I want to thank her for highlighting this issue. I want to pay tribute to not only her constituents, but many other women who have spoken powerfully about the effects of Valproate and the effect that it's had on their lives and those of their children. It is their tireless campaigning that has been vital in highlighting the further action that's needed to ensure that women know the risks, help to make an appropriate judgment. It's vital, therefore, that also that all healthcare professionals work together to rapidly reduce and eliminate pregnancies exposed to Valproate. I hope the actions I've outlined today show that steps are being taken to ensure the necessary assessment, the monitoring, and indeed, where necessary, enforcement action will be taken. And I hope, in commending the Honourable Lady, I hope, like me, she will look forward to Baroness Cumblish's review, which as I say, should be published later this year. And I thank her once again for raising this important matter this afternoon.
Yeah. The question is, this House to now adjourn. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it, order. Order.